because I'd like to bring in Laurie Dundon, a former State Department official under President Obama. It's good to have you with us, Laurie. What do you make of all this? Is this more about Donald Trump tearing up Obama's legacy?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's good to join you. Yes, I think absolutely there is a huge domestic component to this in terms of Donald Trump playing to his base. As your DC correspondent well described, he's focused on a very particular audience. And in some ways, it's an easy narrative to sell, not only to his voters, but also to a number of Americans who have been skeptical about the deal since the beginning. And that's because there is this underlying nervousness about weapons of mass destruction proliferation. That is consistently, year after year after year, polled as one of Americans' primary concerns. But there's separately a history of fear and concern about Iran as an enemy. And with the hostage crisis years ago, but a hostage crisis lasting 444 days, where we can't forget Americans woke up every day hearing the news headline being Iran calling us the Great Satan. There is a base narrative that Donald Trump can tap into. He adds a second layer by pointing out the things that could not be achieved in this agreement, and that's because it was one slice of the many issues that we have with Iran, and negotiators strategized about taking this on one slice at a time. That was a purposeful, intentional strategy to achieve the most achievable.
But Laurie, what about the shortcomings of the deal? Because, you know, even President Macron and Boris Johnson have said, you know, in the past couple of weeks, there are shortcomings to this deal. Not enough was done to stop Iran funding terrorist organizations, causing chaos across the region, calling for the destruction of Israel. You know, all of this just was not taken into account, and that Obama was too lax on that. He didn't push hard enough for that, because Iran, after all, is the weak player here. Iran is the one with the most to lose.
Well, there's quite a big difference between not acknowledging that it existed or being too lax on it versus what they could realistically secure in a deal. So it was many of these issues were firewalled, kept out of the negotiations with the intent of trying to get the best deal to block nuclear proliferation possible. To achieve that goal. And it wasn't only a U.S. goal. This was a series of negotiating partners. This was core anchors in the international community in the P5+1 that agreed we would work on this one objective together. Now, that did not mean continue walking away from U.S. and other capitals' concerns about these other very destructive issues in the region. Absolutely. They also were not necessarily new issues. Iran's concern about militarism from Iran in the region, concern about their playing in proxy conflicts, that's not new. The question was just how best to tackle that. This was a strategy, push as hard as they could in the nuclear negotiations, get as tough of a deal that would block every pathway to development of a nuclear weapon, that would expand the breakout timeline. We were looking at the onset of the negotiations, we were looking at the capability for Iran to be able to break out to a nuclear weapon within a few weeks. They bought us time to get to a year. So it was get what we can get so that we can assure blocking a pathway to a nuclear weapon for the period of time that we can get it, and then keep going, then keep working on a tougher policy from there. And a lot of the criticism the last few weeks has been, you know, this argument over fix it or nix it, which is, you know, why do you have to throw out the first phase in order to keep going forward and address your concerns in these other issue areas?
That's Trump's tactic, though, isn't it? That is the stunt he's pulled with North Korea, and, you know, some might argue that is paying dividends now, because Kim Jong-un is going to sit down to talks. The North Koreans and the South Koreans have ended the conflict. Is that what he's trying to do here with the Iranians, and do you see that paying off?
It does seem that he's trying to use the same tactic. North Korea and Iran are very different cases, not only because of the different domestic politics and working through the factors of leverage and how those negotiate. I mean, I would imagine Trump, as he sells himself as a master negotiator, would know that one of the first rules of a good negotiation is know your opponent. Know what makes your opponent tick. And if his strategy of escalation and rhetorical threat, is not the best one to get change, to create change from his Iranian negotiating partner, then I'm not sure why he's doing it in terms of really seeking a benefit from it. But going back to your point, Iran and North Korea are very different cases. North Korea, we're just beginning the dance of the negotiation. The tough talk and the tough leverage was to get them to start opening up those negotiations. Iran, we had built up years of tightening economic sanctions, getting tough to get them to the table. Now we've made a commitment, and now we're going to threaten to escalate?
Laurie Dowden, Annette Young here in the studio with Laura Cellier. As you were alluding there to the fact that this is clearly a game of brinkmanship, but at the same time it's also happening when the US is about to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And I was talking to Robert Malley, the president of the International Crisis Group, the other day, and he said to me, this is the week of living dangerously as far as the American government is concerned. Would you agree with that?
Not only the week, I'm actually, for a little while now, I've been worried about the month of May. I think we're reaching a period of key decisions. There just is a sequence of events coming up on the calendar that started with this decision. We'll have the opening of the Jerusalem embassy. We will have the North Korea talks potentially coming in the next weeks. We also have the June 1st decision now about trade tariff exemptions. A lot of these could put the U.S. in a position of pushing away what allies they have left, or at least allies, even if they can't drop off cooperation with the U.S., wanting to take a big step back. And I'm seriously worried about that long-term implication. And I think Trump, it's very clear, Trump has created a great deal of nervousness on the European side of the ocean tonight with his decisions, because the secondary sanctions that many of your guests have talked about are real and create a very serious impact for European companies. But I'm also worried about the second foot dropping in the economic space of Trump's decision on tariffs on steel and aluminum at the end of this month. So European allies, the European allies' relationship with the U.S., it's going to be tested, I think, highly in this month.
Laurie, thank you.